It being 6 p.m., I will open the January 24th, 2024 meeting of the finance. Us here in person, so we have a quorum. The first item of business are public comments. I see Kim Imberg on there. And any comments, Kim? No, I don't see any.
No, thank you.
All right. That looks to be the only person from the public here. We have Keith Hickey sitting in on the meeting with us, and we have Carol on the Zoom meeting. The first item I'd like to handle is this reserve fund request that's attached to the agenda that we have. It's the facilities department looking for $7,324.18 to be used to repair a large leak and multiple small leaks in the boiler at the Reed building. My comment on this is that, number one, it's certainly was an emergency. Number two, the amount is not, terribly significant. Number three, they have 105, or the facilities department has $105,000 left in their repair account. So my initial reaction is that I would have liked to see this amount covered by the $105,000 and not do a reserve transfer and, perhaps tighten the belt for the rest of the year concerning the 105. And if the problem came up towards May, June timeframe, we could consider an additional transfer if needed. However, I have mixed emotions because of the fact that it's $7,324. I've said it before, sometimes I like to see this reserve fund just used up, then we don't have to be faced with requests all the time. And so with that, I'll open it up to other members of the floor here for their comments.
What do we have in the reserve? Do we know what we have in the reserve fund at the moment?
We started with $60,000 and we approved 25, was it?
15.
15, so we have 45 left.
Yes.
The only comment I had or question, maybe Keith, you can answer. So, I'm looking at this real quick and by no means a plumber or a boiler expert. However, I see a leak to a large pipe and a couple small leaks, and it's like Carl said, $7,000, not a tremendous amount of money. But then I'm looking at the invoice, and it appears looks like there was 36, almost 40 hours worked. Can you attest to, was this company actually here for 40 hours repairing this boiler? To me, that seemed like a large amount of time if I'm reading this thing correctly. Did you see the emergency situation?
I did not specifically see it myself. I can certainly get the facilities, somebody from the facilities department to attest to their 40 hours. And if you want to wait until your next meeting to approve this reserve fund transfer, it's fine. I can't sit here tonight and tell you that I can attest to a 40-hour project, man hours being done to this project. I know somebody can, it's just not me.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else noticed that. I mean, it's 40 hours is a tremendous amount of time to look at a boiler and assess. The reed's not that big.
Well, the only thing I thought of, I too, I didn't think so much of the hours, just the fact that here's another time that the labor is a killer. But I also wondered if perhaps it was two people for 20 hours.
I'm sure it was more than one person, but if you'd like me to, I'm happy to go back and get more detail on what the 40 hours was comprised of.
Yeah, that's the only comment I have.
Okay, Elaine, do you have any thoughts or questions?
Nothing that it hasn't already been said.
Okay, David, would you rather us wait or, take a vote now?
Through the chair, whatever you're more comfortable with. We're gonna be back in 2 weeks. When's the bill due?
Again, I think we can. I don't know when the bill's due. I haven't looked at the bill, but I don't think waiting 2 weeks is gonna be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, it said terms net 30.
To say it's dated 1/19.
So-
Yeah.
So 219, I mean, I don't want to include interest charges over my
You
question,
meet before that. Won't be a problem.
so.
I know
I
somebody pays.
leave it up to the chair. I mean, like you too, if we have the money in the budget, spend the money that's in the budget first too.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to have the finance committee authorize the $7,324.18 for this boiler repair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 0. Abstained? 0. And David, that's just part of my doing that is I get frustrated at other meetings like the Board of Selectmen when things always are kicked down the road. So I do everything I can to prevent kicking down the road.
No, I mean, it's not crazy unreasonable, but it's.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
The next thing on the agenda is to look at the department budget reviews. And on the first one I'd like to do is just discuss a bit the revenues. I spent some time this morning going through the whole package here. And I actually met with Keith and Carol this afternoon to, ask some questions and get a little bit of a better understanding before we got together here tonight. So the first page I'd like you to turn to is the page that says consolidated revenue expense estimates. It's I think it's the second pullout. This is the summary that to me is really the Bible of the total budget. And I think of it, as really almost like an income statement, only it's always just a balancing, total revenues and total expenses. The couple of things that I would note is that, where we have new growth at $575,000. That's would seem low when you look at FY23 and FY24. I think FY24 was extremely high, that I would not expect to see that until we, until or if we ever get another major project here in town. The 575, I believe, is conservative. I also believe that it's probably not unreasonable to have it a bit conservative, because if we run into any problems having to increase any of the expenses, like for instance, the schools, both Silver Lake Assessment and the local schools are in the budget at a 3% increase. If that should come in at even 4 or 4.5% increase, we have a $400,000 additional expense. I would recommend that we try to, find that somewhere on the revenue side to offset it without going into the excess levy capacity. So I'm okay with the 575. Mike or David or Elaine?
No, I think it's feasible.
Nope, I think you're right on.
Okay. The other thing, state aid, we go down. So you'll see here, we get down to what I call the levy amount. You don't see the total there. You see the maximum allowable levy, and then you take away the excess levy capacity. That gets you what you're actually going to be taxing the residents for. In this situation, we're looking at a $42,468,000 net levy versus last year of 40,470,000. So an increase of 1,998,000. So we got, I point that out because that equates to a 4.9% increase. And that compares with your 3.6% increase that you're seeing at the bottom line. And that's because your other sources of revenue are basically flat, a level. So that I think it's important that when we're reviewing budgets, we have to keep in mind that the budgets as presented are creating a tax increase of about 4.9%. The state aid, 7,000,008 is what the FY 24 budget was. That's what we've always done. If the state aid comes in at 100, 200K more, it's not a big deal. If the governor's budget comes out next week or next month, whenever the final is coming out, and say it was going to provide us with 7,000,005, well, then we'd be looking for the administration to make an adjustment. We get into the local receipts, 6,000,004, both this year and 6,000,004 planned for next year. The big items in that are always the motor vehicle taxes. That is at 2,490,000. In fact, we can actually turn the page a couple pages if you want. Go down to, there's a tab that says other.
I'm waiting for him to say what on it.
Yeah, about two things down, and I have trouble reading it, but it says categorical analysis. After that, there's a FY 25 department revenue estimates. So that you can see the motor vehicle excise was 2,000,005 in 23, 2,000,005 estimated for this year, 2,000,005 for a budget next year. I think that's reasonable. If we skip down to the miscellaneous reoccurring, the room occupancy excise tax. This is what Keith was talking about. The actuals were 175K. This is all on the same page.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Motor vehicle boat, it's miscellaneous. Missing room.
I'm waiting for her to get the right page.
Okay, that's what I was. Is it that last year? Is that last year's book?
This is like, yeah, 20 feet ending June 30.
No. Because that's the budget we voted for this.
This is what I would have.
That's
Didn't
last
take the
year.
book there.
Wrong one. I'm not sure. That's a.
I'll take that one.
You want? Yeah, wrong one.
Okay.
It's about the fifth tab in.
Can't-
There you go. Almost, yeah.
FY 25.
Okay. Got it.
So I'd just like to go down through to some of the more significant ones. The motor vehicle tax excise, we've been at 2,000,005. I think that's reasonable. If we, and I only mention the room occupancy excise because that shows where we're getting reduced revenue from that because of. Oh, hi, Jason. Welcome. Vote, you gotta do it. Roll call. The
room excise.
room excise tax is gone from 175 when we only have a budget this year of 40. And that's because of, if you're in a hotel for over 60 days, you don't have to pay the excise tax. And we got permanent residents in the hotel room. The next one of significance is the ambulance revenue. Again, we're trying to be a little conservative there. We had it as high as $1,322,000. Last year, we budgeted $1,200,000, and this year they're budgeting $1,200,000. That's another one that I like to see it being conservative, so that if any last minute adjustments have to be made, you can increase that by 50 or 100K. The next page, we have licenses and permits that have been staying right at about $1,100,000. The biggest thing being the transfer station stickers and the building permits.
And I'll be the jerk to ask,
Sure.
right? So got some inflation going on, right? Cost of stuff is going up. How are we comparable to other towns? When was the last time we had some kind of rate increases? I know I use the transfer station.
Sure.
So, I can remember the days where, I won't say it was half of what it is now, but it was less, right? It goes up every year, right? But I'm not as familiar with like the fire permits and the building permits. Are we competitive with other municipalities? Have we had increases in the last couple of years?
We have, so, the building permit, fees were modified and approved by the Board of Selectmen between 4 and 6 weeks ago. They, went into effect, I believe, January 1. So there's a number of things going on. I think we are competitive and we are up to date. We've done that analysis and presented to the board. They approved that. We've seen a slowdown in permits being requested and issued. Because we've got, for a number of reasons, one of which is, the moratoriums on water and sewer. There's been a significant slowdown in the number of permits being pulled, which is why we try to keep it level, the estimated revenue the same, even though we're collecting more money per permit. We aren't receiving the number of permits we have been in the past.
So I think that, the town has taken action on these items to have it fairly current. And I think it also reflects what I like to report back at least once every 3 months, is that we don't do a good job in Kingston of growing any kind of a commercial tax base. Go ahead.
You good? I mean,
Yeah. go
okay.
ahead.
Because I was just gonna say, I'm looking at the tax rate recap that gets submitted to the state, and actual receipts for us fiscal 2023 was $7,140,000, and now we're looking at $6,400,000.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. Karen
Yeah.
can give the more detail than I. Again, I think what you see with the actual revenues reported for fiscal 23, permit fees were higher than estimated. Ambulance fees are higher than estimated. We also had a one-time revenue of $320,000 that was reflected as a revenue in fiscal 23 that we don't have in fiscal 24. Again, those are some of the main reasons. Carol can probably jump in where I'm missing out.
I was gonna say, I'm sensitive, as you're aware, of how much free cash ends up at the end of the day. Because even, again, looking at the state's websites, 2021 was 3,200,000, 22 was 2,000,000, 23 is 3,600,000.
Yeah, and I've done an analysis. The capital planning committee asked me to do an analysis of free cash, which I did, and I'm happy to share it with the FinCom as well. We started the fiscal year with about $900,000 of free cash that was carried over from the previous year that wasn't spent. We had $700,000+ in unexpended appropriations, which is less than 1% of the 50 million that we had approved. We had about 1.4, I think it was 1.4, Carol, in revenues over estimates that got us to the 4 or 5 that we're at for free cash. So, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, I think there's an opportunity maybe to bump the revenue up a little bit. I don't think that we want to move too much. As Carl had mentioned earlier, I think what he's looking, I think the revenues we fine tune once we get the full budget. And it's conservative enough where we can adjust some things to maybe take a little bit of relief off of the taxpayers. But again, if you look at the chart that we had, that I had put together in my presentation, free cash was a little more than it was in 22, more than it was in 23. It was, and it's been up near between 2.5 and 3 million for the last several years.
Right.
So it's consistent. And we use that, right or wrong, as a funding source for a lot of our needs, whether it be capital, stabilization, deposits into the capital reserve funds. It's I think the philosophy, at least since I've been here, seems to have been prevalent. So I think we're just going to be consistent with how it's been done. If there's a change in how the group wants to do things, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Where the money, what the buckets the money is going into is same as it's always been.
Mhm.
It's just that when you have more money, you tend to spend more money. That's all. And I think at this point, taxpayers
So
can
again,
certainly, I know we're not there yet. but
Yeah.
It's just a conversation. I'm very big on,
yeah. Well, I get it. I mean, if we were looking to spend all our money, we would have spent the entire amount of free cash, not carry over $1 million. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think the board of selectmen and the FinCom have been pretty conservative with how they want to spend their money. So, I think we've been able to build up free cash, reserve accounts. Carl's point, the excess tax levy has increased. So I think we're being reasonable.
I think where I am right now, I recognize, and I told Carol and Keith that the 6,408,000 is
Yeah.
very conservative. I personally think that there's 300 or 400K in there that if we had to use to offset school increases or something else, that I would be making a push to see that that's the way the town administration was revising the budget, was bringing up the local revenue items. I personally would not want to get close to the 7,138,000 because I believe that really did have 300 or 400K of one-time type of charges in there.
okay,
So, but I think it's good to have it on the table that we as a finance committee believe it's very conservative. And as we go through the process, again, that we may be coming back and saying, hey, we'd like to see more here. And, that if that means that the excess levy capacity goes up some more, great. That's how we get money back to the taxpayer eventually.
Carol has her hand raised.
Yes, Carol.
I just wanted to say, one of the big ticket items on our actual revenues was investment income. Last year, we had $425,000 in investment income. I didn't want to put that type of money in this year for an estimate. So that's something I can look at once we get the school budgets, as far as increasing that line as well.
Yeah, Carol, I guess I'm a little confused on that because I thought from the local revenue here, we're seeing the actuals in 23 of 426. Oh, and then it was the 24 budget that was 250. Okay. But I was gonna say the prior treasurer got the investment income up and now the current treasurer has got it raised again.
Yeah.
And we were getting basically no interest, but now that all banks are paying more, we got our bank to go, I got them to go to about 3.5. And I think Ken has gotten it up to about 5% on
Oh,
our
yeah.
good cash. That's,
I mean, that's what
In the bank.
CDs are at. these
Yeah.
days.
okay, yeah, that investment income was one that I had on my list here to discuss.
But I would assume that's gonna be high, it's gonna be the same or similar, no, Carol? This year?
It's, who knows?
It's election year, it's gonna go up.
Well, I mean, rate, if it's just conservative and it's in like a CD type, driver that there wasn't that much change from FY 23 to FY 24.
Listen,
The interest rates are still at about, CDs about 5%.
They are, plus we have more money.
Mhm.
In our stabilization, that goes up, $200,000 each year. So,
But I think we're all on the same page. I think we all here, sitting here, know we're probably gonna need to find money because the schools are gonna come in.
yeah,
And we may get to the end of, and when the selectmen look at this too, the selectmen may have some concerns about us being too conservative. That, they also should be looking at doing the best they can to benefit the taxpayers.
Mhm.
All right, I think that takes care of my discussion, my review of the revenues. We don't need to take any action on that. I think that, traditionally, the finance committee hasn't even really voted on revenue numbers. Now, I believe that when we come towards the end, we may want to actually vote that we approve or recommend approval of the revenue that's included in the budget. The next item is I was going to go through some of the minor, what I call minor expense budgets here that I would hope are not terribly controversial and that we can go through fairly rapidly and vote our recommendations. The first one being the Agricultural Commission. The Agricultural Commission had gotten a budget increase to $1,000 last year. The town administration is now recommending $250. It's a reduction based upon, their expenditures in the past few years. And in fact, I don't think Jean Landis she's no longer the chairman of that commission, I don't
I
think.
think she's
But I did
she's
send,
not a full-fledged member.
okay, because I sent out a notice to her, because I remember a couple of years ago, she kind of challenged what we were doing with that. So I'm very comfortable with the recommendation of reducing it to $250.
Yeah, I don't even remember why we raised it last year.
The police detail. They had,
Police
that's my recommendation is
they had it
had,
out here rather than, and I think it was moved. Probably from away from here.
So could I have a motion on the Agricultural Commission budget?
I will move approval of the Agricultural Commission budget for fiscal 25 at the amount of $250.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, Carl, I'm gonna be a pain in the neck, but you better. Gonna do, roll call. I apologize. Sorry, Carl.
One more time, formal with substance gets the benefit of working in town government. However, Carl, in favor.
Michael,
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
Approved. 5-0.
Thank you.
The next department is the assessing department. I had hoped that I'd be able to talk with Maureen Clark, the assessor, but she's been out sick, and so I did go over this a bit with Keith today. I think that it's pretty straightforward that they have, I think we all recognize that the budget for this department has increased over the years as we've tried to get the department to be in a position where The assessments are more generally accepted as being accurate. The state had come in and requested some additional work be done. So the budget request for this year is $191,335 versus the budget last year of $185,368. The department is made up of Maureen, the full-time assessor, her assistant, full-time, and one assistant. One part-time assistant, which I think the head count in that department has been the same since I've been involved. So,
Those are not the numbers.
Yeah, I don't have, I have 204,000.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at 50 pages.
I know, they're sticking together.
Mm,
Okay.
All right, 231,366 and 222,964 last year.
It's about 3.5%. I'm doing that. Right.
The only question that I had, software contract jumped, $1,200 do we have an annual renewal? Is it a 5-year contract? How does that work?
It's an annual renewal with Vision Appraisal. We use that. That software is predominant in Massachusetts for municipalities and
Okay. And then, my other line item was, travel and meetings. Historically, we're running, about 14 or 1,500. Then we had the COVID years in there. Last year we had up to $2,000. Anticipated some travel and training again. But we're only at 190 year to date. So is that gonna be happening later this year? So it's not on here yet?
it is when they're gonna start doing some additional training once it warms up a little bit, and they go out and start measuring, listing some of the new properties and visiting some of the existing.
Okay, so you think they're gonna reach?
We've got an assistant assessor who has taken on a bigger role in the department and is more active, and there needs to be some additional training to allow her to do some of the field work that position hasn't done in the past. That's what the requested increase from what was spent in past years to the 2,000 that's been requested this year. It was approved last.
I'd like to add something if I could. A lot of their expenditures in travel happen after, during the abatement season, which is coming up in February. So they have from February till April to conduct all their assessment on any abatement applications, or say reassessment if one, is reassessed. So a lot of that travel is going to, the houses to determine whether the assessment was correct or needs adjustment.
Sure, they're happy to see him.
It does.
I will move approval of the assessor's budget for fiscal 25 with personal services, the amount of $204,417. Other expenses, $26,949, and a total budget $231,366.
Second,
Carl Pike, favor.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500. Now we'll do revaluation towards the back of the book because that's so related. Revaluation was budgeted at 51,400 this past year. We've spent 30,000 of that already. They're requesting the same 51,400 next year. That we have, this is where they're using partly outside contractor to do some of the work that the state encouraged us to do. I don't, Carol or Keith have any comments on that one?
So again, I think the condition of the assessing records when our current assessor, Maureen, took responsibility for them were subpar. When DOR came out a year or so ago to review the assessment records, half of the assessments records that they took, 50 out of 100 assessing cards, were inaccurate when they visited the property. So the state has issued a number of findings that Maureen has a timeline on. We're maintaining that timeline, and she has done everything she possibly can in the timeline that she can have it done in. This money is primarily, as Mr. Pike mentioned, for outside appraisers to come in and assist with review of existing properties. We have to review a certain percentage of those a year, and then also pick up the changes from building permits that have been submitted. So I would argue that this money is critical in making sure that our assessing records have as much integrity with them as they possibly can.
Elaine?
How many properties does this cover? The 51,000?
I don't have a number. I don't know if Carol knows.
There's 5,400 parcels in Kingston.
Right, so they're gonna get to every parcel this year?
No, I believe it's 1/5.
I think it is too.
So that's 1,000 properties?
Yeah, 1,000, 1,200. Yes.
So it's what, $5,000 a property? What's that, 500 a property?
500.
500 a property?
No, if it's 1,000, we're doing 50,000, it's $50 a property.
50.
Yeah, $50
Okay.
a property.
Okay,
Again, we go out to bid. We've frankly had some real challenges trying to find people who are qualified to go out and measure and list properties. Like a lot of towns, it's just the numbers aren't there. So be a great job for somebody who wanted to invest some time and get it trained and get it out, spending quality time in the field.
And doesn't this 51,400 cover both the normal? Every year we have to do so much to keep them up to date.
Yes.
Because I remember reviewing this budget prior years.
Yeah.
You always had a fixed amount of 15 or
Right.
20,000 or something. So that the special difference is probably the 20 to 30,000 that's really happening. I personally, after sitting through the last 3 or 4 years of assessing budget changes and issues and requesting additional help, this, that, and the other thing, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw this assessing and revaluation combination of less than 300K. I thought maybe we are really making progress and getting to the point where we won't have to see more than standard increases.
Is there any type of, I'm sure, I hope we do, but analysis that gets done at the end of, obviously we found that 50 out of the 100 cards were inaccurate. I'm assuming they were light, the assessments were light,
Some,
right? Or
so
we're missing outbuildings.
I
and
think
so on
that's
and so
probably
forth.
a fair, I don't know if all of them were, but certainly I would suggest to you that a lot of them were probably under assessed.
Do we have any type of evaluation? So we're spending 51,000, what the return on the investment essentially is?
I'd be happy to, the assessor comes back to work on Monday. I can ask her to get a sense on the values that we've, the properties that we visited, to check either new value or update, and review part of the properties we have to see every 5 years, what the increased value has provided the town.
Just curious.
because that would show a new growth too.
Yeah.
They did have a magically finished attic on the card when I tried to buy my house, which made some interesting last week negotiations a few years ago.
And I had to come out to my house about a month ago to inspect my new deck and put it into the valuation process. I really appreciated
So we
that.
probably can address new growth a bit.
Does anybody here want to, if you want to delay this one until Maureen can be here, I'm more than willing to do that. on this item.
I'm gonna move approval of revaluation, total budget $51,400 for fiscal 25.
Second,
Kyle Pike, aye.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500. Cooperative Extension Services. This is another one that, at one time, I know we were paying, some kind of a county fee or something to have this thing. And it looks like we haven't done anything with it for the last 3 years. So we haven't spent anything in 21, 22, or 23. So the administration has moved it from $500 to $100 just to keep it alive, which seems fine with me.
What is it? I look at this every year and I don't
What is it?
remember at
So,
$100.
It's something I think the 4-H group does with the Plymouth County cooperative. With regards to agriculture, I can't get into a lot of
At
detail.
$100, I'm not super inclined to be
It was
overly.
reduced.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna be all that concerned at $500, but at $100, sure.
So we're just gonna leave it as a placeholder rather than kill it altogether?
Up to you.
I'd leave the placeholder. Be my take on it. You know.
Sure. I'll move approval of the cooperative extension service budget for fiscal 25 in the amount of $100.
Second,
Kyle, aye.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500. Debt service. This one is the standard that we pay on the general fund debt. We don't have a lot outstanding anymore. The thing here that I like to always highlight is if you look back at 2020 actuals, it was 2,000,005. 2021 was 1,000,001. Okay, 2022 on, we're down to the 200,000. That's because we paid off the intermediate school debt after 20 years. That building was financed over 20 years. Carol has helped me to better understand that, some of this, a lot of it is really the reason that we have the excess levy capacity. That I say that the excess levy capacity is certainly $1 million higher than it would be if we were still paying the debt. And it may be closer to 2 million higher. But I think there are enough other things that come into play that I just point that out that, one of these years, this operating budget is going to get another $2 million put in. And yes, I know it'll be outside the levy limit, but it's still $2 million a year or whatever it might be that the taxpayer has to pay. That one of in the stuff that we handed out to you tonight, there were the sheets on the debt service for, I think we actually handed out all three of them, the wastewater and the water. And you'll see the $175,725 for the general fund. A lot of that are some small loans left over from years ago that are gradually being paid down. This is a schedule that a former treasurer had created what I call a monstrous Excel schedule with pivot tables and all kinds of things. But we also, there's a second check and balance. Our financial advisor, Hilltop Securities, also has records of these. And I used to always reconcile a schedule that they would provide with the schedule that we had internally.
Carl, how's this lining up are these pages lining up to this number?
You should have one page that says 175.
One's water, one's sewer, one's general, so I apologize. 175 is here, that's the general funds.
Okay,
The other
where's
two are the water and sewer.
Let's see. Water, these are the water, and this is wastewater.
So you can actually put them in with those departments as well.
okay. So this is only on the general, this line item.
Right.
And any idea what interest rate we're paying on any of this debt?
Not off the top of my head, no.
I can get that for you. And we aren't allowed to prepay.
Well, that takes care of that.
So fine. But if you'd like me to get the debt, the interest. number, I'd be
One
happy.
thing, whenever you see the MWPAT, that's the Mass Water Resources Agency, whatever they're calling it now. And those are always pretty low.
Okay,
Like, the current loans that we have, the new ones are 2%.
Yeah, 2%.
Thereabouts.
I'll get that.
that's all right. As long as we
can't.
yeah, we can't prepay and we're probably earning 5% on our money. And if we're getting charged 2% on my money, then we're ahead. And that's all I care about.
That's all that's.
That's all I'm confirming.
And see, you get to it, it's kind of getting off the subject, but you make a good point because the schools are different, we'll get, before we do any major like roof repairs or something there, you get from the Mass School Building Authority, you get the break. But like if you build a police station, you go out and finance that today, you're probably financing it at 8-9%.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be a big one. All right, I will move that the Finance Committee recommend approval of the $175,726 debt service amount.
Second,
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I
Jason, I.
just keep the order standard for ease of the minutes.
Finance Committee is next. The Finance Committee
These hacks.
is, about the only thing on the Finance Committee budget is always the administrative secretary, who is very underpaid for all the work and effort that she puts in for us. We also have, this year, we have $550 for training, office supplies, dues and memberships. We actually do use the dues and membership one. We're in the Massachusetts Finance Committee Association or something or other. That was reduced by our town administration here from $750 last year to $550 this year. Based upon our actual expenditures, I see no problem with that.
I will move approval of the Finance Committee budget for fiscal 25, personal services, $7,578, other expenses, $550, total budget, $8,128.
Second,
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I
Jason, I.
500. General operation. General operations is really nothing more than our gasoline expenditures. We had actuals of almost 180,000 in 23, budget of 195 for this year, and we're asking for a budget of 180 for next year. We've spent 66 of the 195 this year. I'd ask Keith to comment on this one.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My recommendation is based on just lower gas prices all around. We go out to bid every year with Plymouth County. Those bids came back yesterday. So Carol and Paul Bazzer will be taking a look at what we usually use for gallons of diesel and gasoline. Multiply that by the rates that were, the winning bids, which I think, I don't know if it was both gas and diesel, or gas was down $1 a gallon from last year. So, we're gonna try to fine tune that number a bit once we get once we get Carol the information she needs to do that. But that's the basis. I made an assumption, frankly, that we were gonna have some savings in gas and diesel just because you and I are saving with gasoline and get the gas pumps down compared to last year.
And one thing I will say on all of these budgets, we hope that there's minimal changes between now and April 1st. But there will be some, I'm sure. And so what we'll do is if we've voted something and then Keith, the town administration, makes a $10,000 change in this one, they'll bring it back to us and we'll revote it.
Keith, real quick, the run rate on that, just real rough, looks like it's barely a third as at the end of the year. I assume it spikes some in the winter with snow and ice and things like that, but is it, do you have any sense of where we're likely to come in compared to the 195?
I don't right now. I can try to give you a better idea at your next meeting. It fluctuates because it really depends on, how often and when we've gotten the fill-ups, at the tanks. So I can try to do that analysis for you and bring it back, but I think we'll have some sort of a surplus from the 195. I don't think it'll be more than 20 or 25 grand, but I expect us to have some.
Something.
It's absolutely something.
I'll move approval of the general operations budget fiscal 25 in the amount of $180,000.
Second,
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
The next one is the legal services. Oh, no, historical commission. This is another one that, for some reason had a budget of $1,000 last year. I suspect maybe somebody was more active at that time and they haven't spent any of it this year. So the administration is suggesting $250 based upon their actuals over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I believe that part of the reason the budget went up was because they're preparing for the 300th anniversary. But they're also fundraising as well, so.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. That's true.
That's gotta be the lowest non-zero year-to-date budget number
I think it could be.
ever. I move approval of the historical commission budget, other expenses, $250 for fiscal 25.
Second,
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500. Legal services. Legal services has come down over the last few years, thank goodness, because I think some of us were thinking it might never get reduced. But the actuals for last year were 150K. The budget for this year is 165. They've spent 71 and they're requesting 165, the same as last year. We have a general contract right now that is 12K a month.
Yes.
12K a month, consisting of 8K for general and 4K for labor, for 144K. I think that Keith is in the process of getting new bids in for the next contract.
Yeah, so we, what's occurred in the last couple of years anyways, is we have $144,000 that we pay on an annual basis for legal fees for specific legal services. If there are legal services that the town needs outside of that basic agreement, then we pay whatever their hourly rate is for those services. We're estimating $21,000 more than what we have, what we're required to pay on a monthly basis, 144 versus 165. The Board of Selectmen asked me to do an RFP for legal services. We've done that. The legal service bid is due next Wednesday, the 31st. I spent some time at the MMA conference, last week, and in the exhibit hall, I introduced myself to a number of legal firms, gave them a thumb drive with our bid, and suggested or asked them to consider, taking a look at Kingston and submitting a bid for legal services. So I think we're gonna get 3 or 4 bids. I don't know what they're gonna be, obviously, at this point, but I'll have a better idea in a week or so.
Have you been happy with the fact that we combined the general and labor with the one firm? We used to always have 2 separate firms.
I think it gives some continuity, because there isn't a ton of overlap there, but I think there's some. And to have one firm, being able to address all of our issues, I think there's some benefit to that.
Did your request for proposal, did it go out to be that way, or did
Yes.
it go out, it could be either way?
I think that they can bid any way they want to, but I think ultimately, if push came to shove and a firm was capable in both areas, I would prefer, frankly, to have one elite law firm to deal with.
I think it's always a difficult situation that, having been in the accounting business my whole life, finance, that, you get a CPA firm that you keep for 10 years, 15 years. You get a relationship, it's always good, but then you also got the risk of, almost being in bed with the firm. So I think you have the same thing with legal. There are tremendous benefits for keeping the same firm, but there are also downside. And so trying to balance those 2 factors, I see as always being a challenge. But I'm satisfied with the $165,000 is a reasonable budget position at this stage.
Approval of the legal budget for fiscal 25 in the amount of $165,000.
Second,
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
All right, 500. The next one is liability and property insurance. This one, as you can see, has gone up significantly in the last 2 or 3 years. I discussed this with Keith today. He can talk it much better than I can. I'd ask him to make
Sure.
his comments.
So a couple of things that have occurred with our insurance. Our insurance has been through Maya, which is the Massachusetts Intermunicipal Insurance Agency. It's a program specifically for municipalities. They've done a nice job for us over the years. One of the things that they do every number of years, and we were involved with this in fiscal 24, was they did a revaluation or an update of our values of our property, because obviously the cost to replace or repair these properties have gone up. So they reflected the new values in their premium amount for fiscal 24. So it went from 350 to 417. We're expecting I think a small increase for fiscal 25, which went to 425. We ended up bumping it up after having a conversation with Maya for one sole purpose, which was the wastewater plant upgrade. So we increased from 425 to 455, and not to get too accounting on everybody, but that $30,000 increase was solely because of the wastewater plant upgrade. So the wastewater indirect costs that the general fund charges the sewer department for will return that $30,000. So to try to make it as simple as I can, the town of Kingston's property liability insurance in total was $455,000. Most of that is the general fund. We have indirect costs that we charge the water department and the sewer department for a number of things, including property liability insurance. Those funds are recaptured and reflected as a revenue on the revenue side in the general fund revenues. If that makes any sense to everybody, I apologize for.
The town allocated cost.
They're recouped by the business, if you want to call them that, water and sewer, when we determine the budget and determine the indirect costs. The Water and Sewer Commission review those indirect cost proposals from Carol and ultimately approve those. So in the net amount, how much we raise in taxes for insurance, the net amount is just the general fund needs. If that makes sense.
What he's talking about there is on what I call the income statement of the town, there's a credit of $426,000 for the town allocated cost for water and $344,000 for sewer. That's where you see the expense here, and then you see the credit coming down below the line.
Have we had any claims in the past year?
We had some somewhat expensive ones. We had during the past year, last winter, we had
Pipes in
on
here?
the coldest night of the year, we had pipes in my office burst, which flooded the selectman's office. We also had a fire suppression system burst in the senior center due to the cold weather. That was probably more expensive than this one was.
And we ended up filing claims on those.
Oh, yeah. We have a deductible. I don't know if it's 1,000 or 5,000 in those cases, but they were very reasonable. When they came, the appraisers came out, they saw that if there was frankly, if the desks had a watermark and they're fancy particle board desks, knowing that they may fall apart at some point, they allowed for, replacement costs of desks, things of that nature. So we have had claims. There were a couple of claims that I think were water related as well to schools. So that, we've knocked on wood, I don't know if we had any accidents, like any vehicle.
And just remind me, like for instance, the water damage upstairs, what was the bill on that?
I can get
Carol,
that.
you remember? Water damage? You're on mute.
Sounds good though.
I don't remember. There were several claims, including the school, all on our insurance line, so I don't remember how much that specific one was.
I'll get that information. I'll try to get it.
Well,
broken down by-
the only reason why I pry and why I ask is, and you said that our deductible was $1,000, it's a very low
Now,
deductible.
I'm not sure if it's 1,000 or 5.
No.
Depends. I think building might be 5. Am I wrong, Carol?
5, yeah,
In vehicles are 1,000, I think, right?
Okay, which is
I
still pretty
think so.
low. I don't know how, if we raise the deductible amount and we go out of pocket on some of these things,
We've looked at that.
how it would translate to a premium decrease.
We've looked at that. Every year, Maya comes out at the time of renewal. We review the insurance coverage that the town has. And one of the things that I know that we've asked them about is, if we increase it from 5 to 10 or 15,000 for a deductible, what would our premium look like? And it hasn't changed it didn't really change. So we felt to have the security because, if there is some sort of damage, then we've got to come up with $15,000 to $20,000.
You got Carl.
Well, I got Carl's deck.
Yeah.
But we'd be looking, we would have to find that money someplace else, potential reserve. So we thought it'd be more conservative to maybe pay a few $1,000s more a year in property liability insurance and not have the exposure of the cost to pay the deductible.
Good, thank you.
So I'll get you that information. We had a.
No, I just want to make, I'm
No,
just doing the
I
due
appreciate it.
diligence.
But I think it's good to.
Looking at it
people
from all
know.
angles.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I will move approval of the liability and property insurance budget for fiscal 25 in the amount of $455,500.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500 recommend approval. The moderator,
I move approval for the $100 budget for fiscal 25 for the moderator.
Labor of love.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was not a joke.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
500 recommend approval. The next one is renewable energy, and Carol talks about this in such smooth, understanding, simple way that I'd ask her to speak about it.
Okay, so you'll see in past years, we've had $500,000 as an expenditure. However, we haven't had any activity in that account whatsoever, since that was based on the old windmill. It hadn't worked since 2019. So now that we have the solar array, I've analyzed the amounts we anticipate receiving, and it most likely will be in excess of 500,000. I wasn't sure how much. I don't know exactly how much energy they're going to be producing, but this 750 is offset by revenue that we get in. So we don't pay out a dime until we get money in.
So if I could maybe just jump on what Carol just mentioned. Again, trying to be conservative, we think it's gonna be more than 500,000. We don't know how much more at this point. So we're asking for, an increase of 50% here. The revenues are reflected are $750,000. So it's the net cost to the taxpayer is nothing. If we only take in $550,000, we'll only pay out $550,000. So there'll be a surplus in appropriations and a deficit in the revenues to reflect that.
And it's always good to remember that we're getting no net income, net revenue, whatever you want to call it, out of this until the cost of removing the turbine has been exhausted, because that was the deal that we made with the people that installed these.
So the solar arrays at the old transfer station, old landfill, excuse me, up near the transfer station in the wastewater department. The solar array is online producing energy. To Carl's point, the town of Kingston gets a piece of that revenue. The solar array company or developer was willing to pay for the cost to remove the old turbine, town turbine. He did that, and my thought was to try to pay it off as quickly as we could using the revenues we're getting in. That time frame is about 5 years, depending on how much power the solar array generates. The more it generates, the more money we make, and the quicker we can pay it off. So, my thought was to try to get that done as quick as we can, and then have a new revenue source starting, 4 or 5 years.
I'll move approval of the renewable energy budget. Sorry.
Do you have anything, Lynn?
No.
Move approval of the renewable energy budget for fiscal 25, the amount of $750,000.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
And I would just respectfully.
Jason, I.
So I apologize, Jason. This $250,000 increase does go towards that 4% increase. Same.
It's about a little less than 0.5% then.
I don't,
No, you're
No,
absolutely right.
but I
Yeah.
think it's
And-
important for people to recognize.
And
That's all.
we've also had people on this finance committee in the past that for that very reason would be arguing that we should not be having $1 more in here than we really expected. That if we, if we think we can get covered by, or even if we didn't, let's say we're gonna make it 600K. And then if we have to go back later on, the fall town meeting or something, and increase it to 750, we would.
And again, I think, Carol's trying to be proactive with this, but if it's the pleasure of the finance committee to do something like that, we need to go back at fall town meeting. Happy to do that, to try to cover the cost. We're just trying to avoid asking for funding at the fall town meeting.
And I would say that we accept it now.
Okay.
And as we get into late March, early April, where we see everything landing,
Okay,
then that might be the time that we speak up and say, hey, wait a minute.
okay,
Will you consider, or we
Sure.
recommend you consider?
okay. Fair enough.
The next one is we're moving along here pretty well, the reserve fund.
Yeah, really, don't jinx us, Carl. Come on.
The reserve fund. As you all know, the reserve fund for years, at least since I was in town, was $100,000. It got reduced one year to $50,000. Then I think somebody wanted to do 75,000 and it was back and forth and it was compromised at 60. So we're back here at $60,000 again. I personally think I like it at a lower number like this because the minute it's $100,000, it becomes another source of revenue for certain departments in town. And so my personal recommendation is that it stay at $60,000. Elaine, do you have any thoughts?
No, I agree with that, because when it was 100, it was when budgets were tighter. That's why it was as much as 100.
Okay. David, your thoughts?
Yeah.
Mike? Jason, I forget about when somebody's not sitting in front of me. Any thoughts?
Nope. Aye. I'm sorry, I'm in an elevator, so it was kind of cut out on me.
Mike? What do
Just
you
for the
think?
sake of argument, is there any reason we wouldn't go lower than this?
I guess
What's in the fund?
There is no fund.
No fund.
This was an annual appropriation.
Yeah,
it's just to cover things like this
Boiler.
$7,000 for the boiler.
yeah. It's like,
You know, so
yeah, we got still got.
Yeah, we had 45 before the 7,000, so.
I think the way I would put it is, again, when we get towards the end of the cycle, I would certainly consider, if I really didn't like the bottom line, of reducing this by $10,000. I have no hesitation to go to 50. But again, at this stage, I'd recommend staying with the 60. One of the things I'm trying to do, as you can probably tell, and as we get into some of the bigger departments, it'll become more obvious. I'd like not to be having a finance committee make very many what I consider insignificant changes to what the town administration is recommending.
Yeah,
And now if the town administration is recommending a $300,000 fire department budget. No, what am I doing?
We'd be happy with it.
So,
I'm a little concerned, it's really.
$3 million, okay, budget.
See, the
And-
zeros get you.
And we think that it should be 2,000,008, then I want us to make recommendation changes. But when we want to make a change of $500 or $2,000, I would rather not do that. That's just me. Okay, so I'll make the motion on this one that the finance committee recommend $60,000 as the appropriate reserve fund amount.
sorry,
Carl, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David,
Jason, I.
Approved, 5-0-0. The sealer of weights and measures. This one is, most of you probably know, is Ed Marks, who does it for several different towns. He has a salary budget of $9,267. And he's got $775 worth of expense money. You'll notice his name is on the sticker that's on the gas station pump. And he does, I think he does doesn't he do like supermarkets?
Yeah, the scales and stuff.
Those types of things.
Yeah.
So I think it's straightforward and reasonable.
I will move approval of the budget for the sealer of weights and measures, personal services, $9,267. Other expenses, $775, total budget $10,042.
Second,
Kyle, I,
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David,
Jason, I.
500. Recommend approval. Snow and ice. I took this, normally, we've always done snow and ice, street lighting, transfer station, and streets and parks with Paul Basler and, done all four of them. I thought that this snow and ice and street lighting are so straightforward that I'd like to get them out of the way. The snow and ice budget, I think it's been 346K was spent in 23. The budget for last year was 360. And this year recommending a budget of 361,080. And Carol, I'll ask you again to say one more time why we don't want to be having a budget too high and we don't want one too low.
Budget, we lose the option of deficit spending. In case we have a really bad year next year, we can't have the Board of Selectmen just say, okay, we're authorizing to deficit spend on the snow and ice budget. Can't do that. And in the alternative, if we say raise it to $500,000, that snow and ice budget has to be $500,000 going forward for the same reason.
So I'm happy with the 361,080. Elaine.
Just a question. Equipment rental, 110,000, what's that made
That's
of?
the outside plowing services. Yeah, the outside vendors we use. to plow.
Okay.
yeah, that's a question I had. And then the other question, well, the other thing I'm just gonna add is actually FY23 actuals. It didn't snow last year.
So
How did we spend so much?
it didn't snow a lot, but there was a lot of opportunity or need to go out and sand and salt, not so much plow.
Yeah.
And again, one of the things that the streets, trees and parks department does with the snow is they will fill that salt shed completely in the spring if there are funds available to do so, because typically salt increases in cost from year to year. It doesn't go bad. So if he had the opportunity to spend or to fill that shed at whatever the cost was at that point, he did that. So we started this fiscal year with a full salt shed.
And I think also that when, that a couple of weeks ago, when we had all the salt that was put down on the road that you see now, that those types of storms are just as costly as 4 or 5 inches of snow.
The other thing I just want to mention to the FinCom is there has been I think a longstanding practice that there's been a minimum number of hours that we offer the outside vendors for snow and ice. We offer them a minimum of 20 hours in season, and if they by I believe April 1st don't haven't accumulated 20 hours, then we pay them the difference per hour for the equipment that they use. So that will vary depending on the type of equipment from $100 to $165 an hour for each piece of equipment. So while we may not have spent, or we may not have actually had $85,000 in costs associated with people actually out there plowing for outside vendors last year, last year there was a payment made in the spring to vendors for the balance of 20 hours.
Yeah, I remember Paul talking about that.
And we are, we're down, the town still remains down, I think over 20 outside vendors to plow right now. One of the things that Paul brought forward to the Board of Selectmen late summer, early fall was an incentive. We see a lot of those signs around in different towns we were offering a $750, what we were calling insurance stipend, insurance for these outside vendors to plow for a municipality is the cost of that insurance has increased significantly. So we're trying to get as creative as we can to find ways to incent a person with equipment to come to Kingston rather than go someplace else. Frankly, that wasn't very successful this year. So whether we do that again in the future, I'm not sure. But those are some of the things that are kind of evolving within the snow and ice budget.
You know, the way I kind of look at it is it's a $350,000 expense in a so-called good year. And when there's, you know, 3, 4, 5 feet of snow over a winter, it's a $600,000 expense. It's just a fact of life.
All right, I'll move approval of the snow and ice budget, personal services in the amount of $85,000. Other expenses, $276,080. Total budget for fiscal 25, $361,080.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
Finance Committee recommends 500.
0.3% budget increase is pretty nice. Saying,
Street lighting.
It can be done.
it'd be a little hard when we start doing the contracts, Elaine.
Well.
Street lighting, we had a budget of 63,250 last year. We've spent 27,000 through December, and we're requesting 65,250 this year. I think this is another standard budget that tends to go up 5-6% every year as the cost of electricity goes up. And it is what it is, I think. Any questions or comments?
I will move approval of the fiscal 25 street lighting budget in the amount of $65,250.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
Jason, I.
David, I. Sorry.
Street lighting approved by Finance Committee at 500. Wage and Personnel Board. The Wage and Personnel Board is the administrative secretary only.
I will move approval of the wage and personnel budget in the amount of $7,578.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
The next one is the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's a budget of $8,028, the same as last year. $3,789 is spent year to date. Most all of that is the administrative secretary for the ZBA.
Move approval of the ZBA budget for fiscal 25, personal services, $7,578, expenses, $450, total budget, $8,028.
Second.
Kyle, I.
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
Okay, that takes care of the items that I thought we could try to review from the FY 25 budget tonight. The next thing that we have on the agenda is I've done a draft schedule of our meeting dates, the various departments that we'll try to review at those meeting dates, and kind of finance committee responsibility. What I've tried to do is have Elaine and I, kind of the lead for some of the departments with some of the newer people supporting us. And then I've had David and Mike doing both, sometimes being the lead and sometimes being the support. If there's any department, and we don't have to do this tonight, but if there are any departments that, you know, I've got your name next to that you say, oh, I really shouldn't do that one. Or there's any that they say, hey, I really would like to do that one. Just let me know and we can make changes. What I suggest is, you know, that in some cases, you may say, hey, I'm not sure I really need to meet with the department head. And, you know, if you come up with your questions, I'd encourage everybody, and I think I can see tonight where people have done it, is to go through every department. So that even if you're not doing something, say for the selectmen, you've gone through that department budget and you have your own individual questions. As many questions as we can. I think it's good if we can get it to Keith and Carol and the department head ahead of time. So that when we come into the meeting, we, you know, maybe review a fire department budget for 20 minutes instead of an hour.
I don't have any specific concerns so much as because I'm on a school schedule, my ability to conduct these meetings in quantity is really limited. And so if there's a way where I can be doing one, maybe 2 or 3 for each of the weeks instead of 5 in the 2 weeks in the middle of March, when unfortunately I know that's a pretty
Sure.
brutal time. At any rate.
And also, you know, I think that sometimes you don't have to meet with the person in person. You can send an email in and say, hey, here's the things that I'd like to get, you know, a little bit more understanding of.
Yeah, if there's a way to adjust even say 2 of those to earlier in the cycle, that would be helpful and not at all thinking about which.
Yes. Okay, that sounds reasonable. David, you're
No
good.
qualms, no good,
Good.
I'm fine.
Elaine,
I'm good.
I'm being you're good. Right?
I think it sounds good.
Okay, Jason, and the same thing for you. Any changes that you want to suggest, you know, feel free to do it. Let's take, since we're still pretty early here, let's take 5 minutes to, because at least we haven't, I've asked, Rhonda in the future with the minutes that, when she at the very latest, when she posts this meeting, a finance committee meeting, to get us the minutes at the same time, so that we've got a couple of days to review them before we come in here. I think so.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You don't want to stay with us till the bitter end?
While you read minutes, please don't take that person.
I'd almost be more worried if you did.
Thanks, guys.
Good idea. Just to get the ball rolling, I'll move approval of the January 10th, 2024 minutes, pending any amendments.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna hold you up. On the prelim FY 25, do you have the minutes in front of you there? I would suggest that, where it says Kyle feels that 1.5 million is too high, how about Kyle feels that 1.5 million is possibly too high?
Yeah, and I'm in there too as well on the reserve fund request with Mark, because I remember I asked about something. I asked about, inquired about, the warranty on the refurbished, and then also what the cost would be to, instead of doing a refurbished, to just get a whole new transmission. And he mentioned about supply chain issues and that wasn't feasible. So I would go back and run the tape on that and add something in about that we did our due diligence there.
Okay, yep, that sounds good. And Karen, Rhonda, if you have any questions about that, get in touch with David directly. And when we make our motion, it'll be to approve the minutes as amended based upon your discussion. And again, on the second page, member comments, questions and concerns. Michael noted that the state estimates a revenue shortfall of 1 billion, which might result in a reduction to state aid.
You beat me to that one, so I'm otherwise all good.
Yeah, I think I'm good with the rest of it. Oh, no, what's this? Michael asked in the philosophical discussion, Michael asked what the increase for the schools is expected to be, and Keith stated 3%. Yep, bringing the bottom line budget to a 5% increase. Shouldn't that be 3.6? Because the bottom line budget increase right now is 3.6.
Did you have that conversation about if you take this out, then it's gonna be higher?
Yes, probably did, but that would be 4.1%.
Yeah,
Can we just get rid of what's after the comma in that line?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, let's just put a period at 3% and just strike the
yeah.
next 8 or 9 words.
Good. Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve the minutes, and I put a friendly
Amendment.
amendment in, as amended
Yep.
based upon the discussion.
Accepted.
Okay.
Kyle, I,
Michael, I.
Elaine, I,
David,
Jason will abstain. I didn't have a chance to review them. We were away.
fine. So we got 4-0-1 to recommend approval of the minutes. Okay, I think the next item I have is member comments, questions, and concerns. Sometimes I feel that I sit here doing too much talking, but here's an opportunity for the 3-4 of you to make any comments or thoughts that you have either concerning this meeting or going forward.
just generally speaking, I'm concerned with the state budget, the deficit and what effect that may have. That's why I'm intending to push back a bit on, the estimates of revenue and free cash and all of that, because I can't see how it's gonna get balanced. Not our budget, the state.
Yeah, I agree. And my only thought there is, I think the good news is that so much of our state aid is for education. And that's usually the very last thing that gets cut from state aid.
Right.
So that, but and that's one of the reasons I'm happy with Carol having the state aid at the level it is. And I think it's difficult at this stage to say we would have it any lower than it was last year.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's a good point.
yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned about the schools as always,
Yeah,
right? I'm, concerned about that number coming in. And I don't know, Carol, if you can answer this, but, I have a feeling we're gonna have increased rolls. And some of that has to do with some of the housing that we have over at the Baymont. And are we getting state funds, education, or are we getting any type of state aid to help us out what I have a feeling is gonna be some increased educational expenses due to increased enrollment.
The only thing I've seen increase is the transportation costs. And we've received funds for those transportation from the state.
And I guess, my maybe last thought is that I still think somewhere along the line, the finance committee, we're going to have to come to grips with the bottom line increase of the budget. Let's say the schools come in at 5%, okay, which would make the bottom line of this budget somewhere around 4.5% increase, 4.5 to 5. Are we going to be willing to stand up and take a stand that, hey, that's not sustainable, that we believe that we need reductions in school budgets, in all budgets. And I think that as we get more, and it's tough the problem is always the same. You don't know where you are until you get the school budgets,
Right.
until you get the Silver Lake assessment. And once you get those, it's almost too late to do much of anything except stand up and say, hey, we're going to town meeting and we're not going to recommend the school budget that has been sent in. So it's just something to think about.
Does anybody know what the student enrollment is? Are we still, for Silver Lake, is Kingston still?
It's still right around the 53,
Yeah.
54%. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the lower grades might be up a bit, but I think the regional, there isn't an issue that this, we talked about it briefly. And I can't seem to get any number, but they are going forward with that, the preschool, redoing the way that's accounted for in the distribution. And I have a concern that that's going to adversely impact this Kingston assessment versus Halifax and Plimpton. So that in some ways it'll get buried in the total assessment. However, let's say the total assessment for us goes up 8%. Some of it will be because of that.
Why wouldn't that be reflected the other way in the Kingston, the local budget?
The costs are supposed to be reflected that way. That the last numbers I saw, the net of the whole thing, moving costs out of Kingston local, out of Halifax local, et cetera, and putting it in there was going to be about $100K. And so immaterial.
Okay.
But the numbers it was the way it was, they put together a pro forma. And the way the pro forma came out, it was rather negative to Kingston and positive to Halifax. So, that, again, when we see the assessments, and the first pass of the assessments would probably be in February. I think that by late February, they'll have their first pass.
Are they still obligated to have it by March 15th?
Yes.
I'd like to add something if I could.
Sure, Carol.
Last year, our percentage was 58% of their total assessment.
Okay.
And how many children? I mean, Kingston's, do we know student count?
I mean, I think Silver Lake is maybe what, 1,500 kids, and we have about 55% of that, so, okay, so
Yeah, 50.
50
Okay, so.
from 7 to 12.
It's about 1,500-ish.
So, yeah,
This
probably
whole-
1,500 for the district, for the town.
I have that amount. Just 1 second.
Okay.
I got it today.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yes, I was trying to fill out our continuing disclosure, so that's one of the things. All right, so for the 2023-2024 year, Kingston Elementary K through 6 is 1,122. Silver Lake Regional District grades 7 through 12 is 887. They don't say how many kids total they
Yeah.
have, but
Yeah, that sounds right, because I always consider Silver Lake as being about 300 per class, and 150 Kingston, and 150 the other two.
It's getting
Towns.
closer to 250. It's, and has definitely been, I think, across the board, a pretty strong decrease. Like where I teach, the older grades are 250, 260. The middle school was, in some years, barely getting to 200. So there's definitely been,
Well, I will give some of the Silver Lake School Committee credit. And of course, they're from the other towns, that I've been at meetings where they have actually put on the table that Silver Lake has to start thinking about the fact that their enrollment keeps going down and the budget keeps going up.
Yeah.
And that we ought to see some adjustments there. The unfortunate thing is, the people that get elected to the Silver Lake Regional School Committee from the town of Kingston will not ever consider something like that. That we're very fortunate that the Halifax town administration and the Halifax representatives on the school committee are very aggressive about speaking up about Silver Lake budget increases. And without that, I'll tell you, you think the assessments are bad now, they'd be much worse. All right, we're getting close to a 7:15. I think that's a good time to, oh, the only other thing I'd say, the next meeting we've got scheduled is February 14th. And to be honest with you, part of that is because I'm going to be out of town for the next 2 weeks. And so that I felt that when I put together this schedule, that, you know, the 6 meetings that I have to review the budgets, I thought that it didn't look like a big load. But again, the whole thing comes down to not getting bogged down and spending, say, an hour on a police department budget or an hour on something else. My philosophy on the water and wastewater departments has always been, they're separate segments. We want to take a look at their budgets, but we don't want to manage those to function, so that I don't spend a lot of time on those. I've got us here to review KES, KIS, and the Silver Lake stuff on April 3rd, and the warrant article. So that's probably a push. So if we get into the middle of March and we have to schedule another meeting, we will.
Carl, can I make a statement about the reserve fund?
Sure.
If I could. Are the financial policies that were adopted by the Board of Selectmen, and I can forward a copy to you. The recommendation, the target is 150,000, minimum 100,000, maximum 0.5% of prior year's adjusted omnibus budget. So just
I
so you
believe
know,
that's the financial policy that I helped to write on the finance committee in my first iteration here.
yes. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, you know, should there be any future discussion.
I appreciate that, Carol. And if the Board of Selectmen wanted to determine that we should have a larger reserve balance, we'd certainly take that under consideration.
Okay,
Thank you. And again, Carol, thank you very much for the support that you provide us, for the fact that you're sitting through a 2-hour meeting here with us. I think it really does help having Keith here. I like having Kim listening, that I think it's always good that Kim, or a representative from the Board of Selectmen, hears what the Finance Committee is saying and how the Finance Committee is focusing on things. And I think it's good for all of us. Okay, David, Elaine, Mike, Jason, any last comments, thoughts?
That we adjourn the January 24th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee at 7:46.
So,
Carl, I,
Michael, I.
Elaine, I.
David, I.
Jason, I.
thank you all.